Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Non-Monogamy Help. Non-Monogamy Help is a relationship advice podcast for people in non-monogamous, polyamorous, and open relationships. It comes out every other week. That's basically what this is, the fourth episode. If you would like to send a letter, you will remain anonymous. You can send it to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com. If you'd like to check out you are checking out the podcast. If you'd like to check out the column, you could read it at medium.com/non-monogamy-help. And if you would like to get updates to your email inbox when there are new columns and there are new podcasts, you can sign up to the newsletter at tinyletter.com/non-monogamy-help. And if you'd like to be super awesome and support the podcast and me and get the podcast and the columns super early, you can sign up to my Patreon, which is at patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. Brilliant. So we will go on to our next letter. I've recently started a triad relationship with two men that make me the happiest I have ever been. As of recently, I started thinking about the future and was wondering how marriage would work. I've tried my best to find the facts online because figuring out how things would work out is key to our future together. If you can help me find answers to what would work, then please get a hold of me as soon as you can. Thank you. I am not sure if you're in the US or the UK or Europe or where you are, because obviously that's going to completely depend on that. Now, just for the sake of this episode, I'm going to assume you're in the US. And the thing I'd say is that what I know from marriage in the US and when I was between the ages of about a bit older, 16, 17, 18, I was involved in a lot of marriage equality activist work for same-sex marriage rights. And I learned there that there are 2,500 plus federal rights associated with federal marriage. Now, the biggest reason in the US why it was important that the federal national government have a marriage available for people, for not just heterosexual couples, was because the options you could get in other states, like civil unions in Vermont, domestic partnerships in California, and reciprocal beneficiaries in, I think, Hawaii, they were not federal marriage. So you'd be married on your state taxes, but you wouldn't be married on your federal taxes, and it created a lot of problems for same-sex couples who had those benefits in those states but didn't have full federal marriage. Even though, marriage as an institution, I could do an entire hours-long podcast about this, and marriage as an institution has really changed from how it first began, which was about property rights and about exchanging, people for property or seeing people as property. We use the word husband, and it comes from animal husbandry, the idea that the wife in this situation is in some way similar to livestock. It has not the best history, but it's changed, and in this culture, that's the history of it. But it changes, and it develops, and it moves, and it exists in different forms in different cultures, and in our culture, it now is more about love and a partnership than it is about property exchange, but it still comes with all of these attached benefits and rights. The things you normally hear about when we talked about the importance of marriage equality was talking about visitations in hospital when someone's sick. We were talking about wills and other important legal documents wherein someone you were married to would automatically be assumed the more or less the next of kin, and especially for LGBT people where they may not get along with their families, the idea that their family can supersede the person that they love, there are horror stories out there about it. You can find tons of them. So marriage is set up as, it's not just, first of all, it's not a religious institution. You can get married non-religiously in a courthouse. There are religious ceremonies, and it does have within different religions some type of symbolism. I'm not denying that. I'm just making that clear. So when you say you want to get married, there's technically nothing stopping you, like just because there's no federal recognition of it. I mean, it did not stop same-sex couples from getting married. There are plenty of same-sex couples before marriage was legalized in the whole of the U.S. who considered themselves married. Marriage as a meaningful act of love can happen whenever and to whomever and however many times you choose. So you're free to do that now, whenever you want. Whether or not the government is going to recognize it in the U.S., as far as I know, there isn't such a thing. And there's a history around this. I mean, there's a whole, look it up, history of kind of Utah becoming a state and the issue with Mormons and polygamy and the reasons behind that, I think, might be central to the language of the way the law is now. But at present, to the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong, there really is no way to federally marry more than one person. In fact, I think that's a crime. I think it's bigamy. I'm not a lawyer, but I think you're not legally allowed to be married to more than one person at the same time, so it's not possible. However, one thing within, when we were talking about marriage equality, the reason it was so important is not necessarily because some people felt like their relationship had to be recognized by the government to be valid. It wasn't necessarily about that. It was about those 2,500 federal rights that were really important, because without those, you had to have a really good lawyer to be able to form these contracts and things that you would need. And even then, the right of the next of kin could, in some states, depending on some jurisdictions, supersede the rights that any lawyer could create through contracts. But a lot of same-sex couples before marriage was legalized in the U.S. did try to get a little bit closer to what marriage would offer them by having the privilege of being able to afford a lawyer and who could write up the right contracts for them so that they wouldn't be in certain situations. Now, it depends on what you want out of this. If you need those legal rights, I suggest you talk to a lawyer. Think about, what does it mean? What does it mean in terms of hospital visitation? What does it mean in terms of property rights? Think about what it is that you want, and a lawyer could advise you about what your legal options are, what kind of contracts they could set up that might give you the legal facsimile that might be closest to marriage that you might be seeking. If you just want to have a nice ceremony where you have a triad marriage, no one's stopping you from doing that. You can do that yourself. You might not be able to do it in a courthouse. You might not be able to have a marriage certificate officiated by any state recognition, but that doesn't mean that you're not married in the sense of your heart. If marriage to you means devoting and loving someone, and pledging commitment to someone, then you don't need any state's recognition for that. That can be done however you want. So yeah, it's I'm not quite sure what you're searching for and what's important to you with this question, but from what I know, I have yet to hear of any country really where triad marriage in the way you're asking about it is legal. There might be countries and places I don't honestly have any knowledge of that may have polygamy be an option. Like, polygamy is possible in some place legally, but I don't know if that is the same as in terms of like the equitable distribution of property between 3 or more people, if that is actually what that is. Do you know? I'm not making myself clear about it, but I don't think, if you're talking about 3 people all married to each other, they're all allowed to see each other in the hospital when they're sick. There's some sort of agreement about wills and see, that's the only, like, of those 2,500 federal rights in the U.S. that I can think of off the top of my head. This is just so many. If that's what you're looking for, I don't think that exists in any, in the U.S. or the U.K. or anywhere in Europe that I know of. And that maybe that's something you want to push for. I think I have a lot of personal feelings about state recognition, growing up and fighting for marriage equality and seeing, the reality that, I grew up with this little personal story. I grew up with, my dad's name wasn't on my birth certificate, basically because in the state that I grew up in, you can't get the kids from your previous relationship you were divorcing if you were an adulterer, and I was proof of adultery, so his name wasn't on my birth certificate. And in where I was, in America, a name change was about $300, or it was very expensive, and a marriage was about $30. So in order to get my name updated so it was my dad's last name and get him added to my birth certificate, my parents got married instead of having my name changed. But my parents didn't really have a relationship. They weren't together, but they got married because it was $30. So I've always kind of grown up and seeing this fight for marriage equality, seeing so many people who have this emotional tie to what is a government recognition, and then also seeing people say, oh, it's not about the emotions, we're married, screw the government, we don't care, it's just about those rights, we need those rights, it's a legal equal rights issue. It's made me, and also to kind of feel like there are a lot of situations as well that I've seen people in, especially when it comes to immigration. That was a very other big aspect of marriage equality that's really important in a lot of countries, which I failed to mention. But, seeing how important that is and how that sometimes requires you to get married in order for the government to think that your relationship is worth keeping you in a country or allowing you to stay. I have a lot of feelings about, I'm not personally that interested in marriage because I've seen it be used as such a big tool for oppression, and I just feel like, if I wanted a commitment ceremony or something like that, which I'm interested in that, I can do that myself. I don't need the government to recognize that, and I feel very meh about governmental recognition of my identity. I feel hesitant to say that the government recognizing my identity or aspects of my identity or aspects of my experience somehow makes it more valid or legitimate. And I don't want you to feel that way. You have your own feelings and do whatever you'd like. But, if you love these people and they love you and you want to get married and you don't need the federal bits, fucking do it. Like, you don't need a government to do it. You don't need a freaking courthouse. Write up your own marriage certificate. Go to fucking Kinko's and be like, Kinko's is like a copy print place, where you can get stuff copied and stuff made. Like Snappy Snaps is in the UK. Go there and be like, I build me a certificate. Why the hell not? Like, you don't need any kind of official recognition. However, in acknowledgement that maybe those rights and visitations and immigration and other aspects of marriage, that might be why you're actually seeking this. I don't think, unfortunately, it's a possibility for 3 people to be married in the US or even in any European country that I've heard of. Could be wrong. Happy to, if I get emails. If I'm wrong, if somebody out there knows of a capability or a place where this is possible, please do email nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com and I will gladly release a follow-up episode. But yeah, there's no place that I know where that's currently possible. So if you're looking for federal rights and federal protections or government protections or wills or anything like that, I would just suggest you speak to a lawyer if you have the privilege to be able to hire a lawyer. Speak to one, see what kind of contracts you can draw up, and see how that goes. But sorry to ramble. But basically I just want you to know that it doesn't matter if someone doesn't federally recognize something that, your love's legit, and if you want to have a ceremony, have a freaking ceremony. Yeah, and I hope that helps, and good luck. So, yes, that is the 4th episode of Non-Monogamy Help. I do want to apologize again for if you heard any background noise. Try to edit it out, but I do record this in my flat, and I have flatmates, and I have a really good mic, but I don't have a soundproof room at present. If you want me to get a soundproof room, you're more than welcome to become a patron at patreon.com/LolyPhoenix and give me an obscene amount of money per podcast, and then I can afford to build my own soundproof room or rent a recording studio. No, I just, $1 a month is amazing, and I'd appreciate any contributions. If you want to get, like I said at the beginning, if you want to get email updates, you can go to tinyletter.com/non-monogamyhelp. And if you want to read the column these are not the same questions that are on the column that are on the podcast. I've changed it up a bit in case you were wondering. So you can read it at medium.com/non-monogamy-help. And yeah, if you would like to send your question, please do send it in, nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com. That's like the 3rd time I've said it, but you know it now. And yeah, I will see you, well, I guess I will speak to you after next week. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our podcast music has been provided by Chris Albury-Jones at albury-jones.com, and the art was made by Dom Jung at domduong.com. Thank you for listening.